Hockey Hall of Famer, author, and former politician Ken Dryden has died.
Here's Rattel over to O'Reilly. O'Reilly getting set, and Dryden came out. Here's Rattel.
We were really excellent all the way through, and the third period, we just did absolutely exactly what we should have done with that kind of lead, and it was just thrilling to play in it.
That was Ken Dryden being interviewed after the Montreal Canadiens won the Stanley Cup in 1978. He backstopped the Habs to 6 Stanley Cup titles in the 1970s, including 4 in a row in the latter half of the decade. The goaltender also played for Canada in the 1972 Summit Series against the Soviet Union. He was in net for the 8th and deciding game of the series that Canada won by a score of 6-5. Dryden retired from the NHL in 1979 to pursue other endeavors. He wrote the critically acclaimed book, The Game, in 1983. Dryden was also the president of the Toronto Maple Leafs from 1997 to 2004. He left the team to become a politician and served as the Liberal MP for York Centre in the Toronto area until 2011. He continued to write, his final book being The Class in 2023. Dryden died after a short battle with cancer. He was 78 years old. Throughout the morning, Linda has been taking us through the reaction. We know this was announced by the Montreal Canadiens. What are the reflections this morning?
Oh, so many coming in from right across the hockey world. As you say, the Montreal Canadiens sending out the news this morning that he died peacefully yesterday after a courageous battle with cancer. And just moments ago, hearing from the Toronto Maple Leafs. As you mentioned, he spent 7 years there as the president of the Leafs. The statement from Maple Leafs General Manager Brad Treliving saying that they are deeply saddened, calling him one of the game's giants who set a standard of excellence. His influence on our organization, on the game of hockey, and on Canadian life was profound and enduring. His life started in Ontario, in Hamilton, but he grew up in the suburbs of Toronto, joined the Boston Bruins in 1964, but was traded to the Canadiens as goaltender for the 1970-71 season. In 8 seasons with the NHL, he won 6 Stanley Cups. He won the Conn Smythe Trophy, the top rookie in his first full season, the league's top goaltender 5 times. And even after doing all of this, he took a year off in the prime of his hockey career to pursue a law career. The hockey world, as we say, reacting. The Vancouver Canucks issuing this on social media. They are deeply saddened, saying his impact was felt far beyond the crease. Haley Wickenheiser calling him an incredible player, thinker, and leader for hockey and Canada. Joe Bowen, who was the voice of the Leafs for 42 years, called it a gut punch to wake up to today, saying, rest easy on that stick, my friend. You accomplished so much in your lifetime. R.I.P. my friend. Well, he retired hockey young, in his early 30s, became a lawyer, authored books about the game, even earning himself the moniker, the thinking man's goalie. And as we've been mentioning, he was a politician on top of all of this. He became a cabinet minister in Paul Martin's government, even ran for leader of the party, was an MP until 2011. Prime Minister Mark Carney called him a dedicated parliamentarian, referencing that unmistakable pose there that he's known for, resting on top of that stick. Ken Dryden was the reason I became a goalie, although I never mastered his ability to lean on his stick, let alone keep the puck out of the net. His return to university at the height of his playing career taught the importance of balance in life. His post-hockey career demonstrated the value of public service. Dryden spoke with Ian Hannah-Mansing back in 2022. We were talking about that 1972 Summit Series win. This was the 50th anniversary of that. And here's his reflections on that.
You literally had been in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final before, and yet you still were feeling that something was different here.
That's right. And because it felt different, then how was I going to end up reacting out of it? Would the same pattern follow? Would those jellied legs that had always disappeared before, would they disappear this time, or would they stay with me? And that was a bit on my mind. But then, of course, the game does begin, and all of that's gone.
He was known for being so calm on the ice and bringing a sense of calm to the rest of the team. We also heard from Grant McCagg, and I wanted to bring this one to you because it's pretty heartfelt. He's the host of Habs Cast, a podcast for the Montreal Canadiens. In a sense, you could say the Canadiens lost two legendary goaltenders yesterday. Of course, with Carey Price being traded yesterday. Here's hoping that Bunny Larocque and Kenny are taking turns brushing aside shots from the Rocket Flower and Beliveau on Heaven's Forum rink right now.
That is a beautiful tribute, and I know so many more will be coming in. So many personal stories people are sharing, both from on the ice and off. And thank you, Linda, for taking us through those this morning. And for more on Ken Dryden's legacy, we've reached Dave Stubbs in Montreal. He is a hockey columnist and historian at the NHL.com. Good morning to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us on what I know is a very difficult day for you, and my condolences to you as well.
Marianne, thank you. It's an absolutely unbelievable day in Montreal. You can't imagine that on the day, literally, 24 hours, less than that, after Carey Price's contract was traded out of Montreal, that Carey Price is not the number one goaltending story in Montreal. It's unthinkable. No one had any sense that Ken was ill. His passing, as it was announced last night, literally has just taken the breath out of Montreal, and well beyond that too, because while Ken was a legend in this city for his accomplishments with the Montreal Canadiens and, playing for the Summit Series team, all the work that he did, he very much was a man to whom his life was not defined by hockey. Hockey was an important part of his life, but it was just part of his life, and it really just set the stage for him to go on to more important things as he viewed them. And he shared so much passion and so much of his wisdom with so many people beyond the game of hockey. That's where we will truly miss him.
And I know you are a personal friend of Ken Dryden. You've been up since 3 a.m., since this news first broke, writing down your reflections and your thoughts right now. You got to know him professionally, also personally. So give us an idea of the man he was behind the goalie mask.
Well, everyone knew Ken to be this very serious, buttoned-down sort of individual who was very quiet and really never sort of cracked a smile. But one of the things that I got to know and really appreciate about Ken over the years, all the time that we spent together, was the fact that he had an absolutely delicious sense of humor under that sort of quiet demeanor. I did a piece with him many, many years ago, and for some reason we sort of surfed off into comic strips, and one of Ken's favorites was The Far Side, done by Gary Larson. And there was one panel that he particularly enjoyed with two deer out in the woods, and one had basically a bullseye on its chest, and the other is saying to the bullseyed deer, "Bummer of birthmark, Hal." And Ken would start laughing uproariously about that. And anytime I would see him, I would just sort of say, "So how's the birthmark doing, Kenny?" And he'd start to laugh, and we'd talk about that comic strip. So he had a great sense of humor. And one of the great things about Ken is that he had a very self-deprecating sense of humor. No one could poke fun at Ken Dryden more than Ken could himself. There were some absolutely world-class pranksters on that 1970s Canadiens team. A lot of the players would tell you that those guys practiced guilty because they lived some really wild lives off the ice. Well, Guy Lapointe, who's still with us, one of the members of the big three of the Canadiens defense with Sarah Savard and Larry Robinson. Guy was one of the great pranksters of all time, and Ken came into the dressing room one day with a brand new pair of boots. Well, he got dressed and went out onto the ice, and Lapointe stayed behind and nailed those cowboy boots to the Forum bench. I guess Ken just didn't want to give Guy the satisfaction, or Ken, and he always joked about this himself, he was famously tight with a dollar. He just said, look, I just wasn't going to let him know that he had got under my skin. So Ken just took some paper towels, shoved it in the boots, didn't resole them, and went through slushy Montreal streets the rest of the winter, just pretty much to tell Guy Lapointe, "You're not going to get the better of me."
These are such great stories. And I think we're going to hear a lot more stories like these personal reflections that I know fans who have been admiring Ken for so long will also appreciate hearing. Something I know they'll appreciate seeing is something you brought to show us. What do you have there?
Yeah, in fact, I have 5 very, very, very special goalie masks on the wall of my home office. And when Ken's jersey was retired in 2009 by the Montreal Canadiens, I brought basically a full-scale replica of his pretzel mask. That's the first mask that he wore with the Montreal Canadiens. He had it molded in Montreal and wore this for the first few seasons and wore it in the Summit Series. And Ken signed the forehead of that mask, and it's among 4 others which hang in a very special place in my home office. So He was really wonderful. Ken just had so many great stories. And again, his life just it just was bigger than hockey. It really transcended the game. And I think that he enjoyed the game, loved his teammates, loved the players who he played with, and loved his opponents. But that said, I mean, it really just kind of set him up for a life beyond the game. And while people always wanted to talk to him about hockey, he was more than happy to talk about politics or to talk about the human condition, and just talk about how people were getting by in the world. And that was very important to him, very much every day of his life.
Thank you so much for showing that mask. It is fascinating to look back at the old pictures of Ken Dryden. And in some cases, he's not even wearing a mask or even a helmet. So to see some of those old photos and now that mask that you're showing us there, that's really great. You talked about the different hats that he wore, both on and off the ice. What do you think his legacy will be? Because he excelled in so many different areas, not just in hockey.
Well, my gosh, yes, he left hockey. He was a lawyer. Ken was a professor. Ken was a television producer. He wrote books. He wrote magazine articles. He was an essayist. He was very, very involved in the well-being and the livelihood of NHL players, past and present. So I think that, you know, it's a very, very broad canvas on which he painted his life. It was not just 200 by 85 feet of a hockey rink. Ken's life was lived on a much grander stage than that. So I think we'll all have our different stories, but we'll have academics who will have their special memories of Ken. We'll have fans who we'll have teammates. So everyone will have their own special memories. But Ken was sort of this giant melting pot of so much. And I think that's one of the things that endeared him to so many people.
And we thank you for sharing some of your memories of Ken Dryden. Dave Stubbs, hockey columnist and historian at the NHL.com.
Thank you.